Good evening, and welcome to part two of the series, The Church and Teen Parenting. My name is Richard Lundy. I'm the team leader of Sikunye, and I'll be hosting us in tonight's webinar. By way of introduction, Sikunye is an initiative of the non-profit Common Good, and we're based in Cape Town. And our goal as Sikunye is to strengthen the local church to be the modern-day villages around families in the unique window of time known as the first 1,000 days, from conception to the age of 2. And we know that when parents or caregivers in this stage are held in supportive relationships, they are better able to provide what their baby needs. And for South Africa to have a brighter future, all of society needs to invest in young children. And Sekunya's work in that is to see churches play their part in seeing children reach their full potential. I encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat box. It's wonderful to see people and see who is in the room joining us from all over the country, from different churches and organizations. Include your name, perhaps where you're joining in from, and the organization or church that you are representing tonight. We have in attendance today, when I've looked at the register, many people from across South Africa. Some of you I know are from NGOs, or others from government departments, academic institutions, local churches. Some of you are here in your individual capacity. And in an ideal world, I think we would have a conference that is several days long so that we can learn from each other and hear from many, many different people. But rather than having a long conference that only a few people can attend, we decided to have short presentations that can reach many people and using Zoom as this platform. And our hope is that you are informed and inspired to have conversations with others in your context about what you hear in this webinar series. A few of you have already shared with us over the course of the last week that you've been using the recordings from last week to start discussions with others around big topics that affect you in your church, in your organization, or community. I know that many of you have attended our previous webinar last week, but for those of you who are with us for the first time, let me briefly recap what was shared to catch you up. We were looking at the issues of teen pregnancy last week. Nicolette Henny took us through the statistics, and we learned that 1 in 3 teenagers in South Africa fall pregnant. Dr. Renee Nasson then covered how teenage pregnancy has additional risks for the mom and the baby. Some of these risks can be reduced if teen mom gets supported to access healthcare early on and consistently. Dr. Viola Fransman then unpacked how teen pregnancy is an issue for the local church and for church leaders. He shared a story of a church leader whose daughter was in matric and fell pregnant. And we also heard from 2 teenagers who shared their experience of being parents. One of the messages we said loud and clear last week is that prevention work is essential. But with 1 in 3 teenagers falling pregnant, there exists an opportunity and a responsibility for the local church to support and strengthen teenagers who are parents. Some of the big points raised last week was to remember that the teenager is still a child. Pregnancy and birth are life-changing experiences, no matter how old you are. And so a child having a child needs more support, not less. We also learned that every teen pregnancy story is unique, and so a single approach is not necessarily useful or helpful. And we learned that through a pastor's story, the power of forgiveness and reconciliation within families. Good can come out of even very difficult situations. If you missed last week, you are welcome to watch the full recording on our YouTube channel. And tonight's event will be recorded, and we will send you an email on Friday morning with links to the recording and the slides used tonight if you want to go back and study them in more detail. Now, we have a great opportunity tonight to hear from a variety of speakers, and we encourage you to use the chat box to add comments, ideas, and any contributions. The overall goal for tonight is to give practical ideas and ways in which you and others can be caring for teenagers who are parents. We'll be looking at what do we want for teenagers, how to care for teenagers without promoting promiscuity, how to introduce layers of support around teenagers, and how to engage with the family of the teen parents. I think it's going to be a powerful 90 minutes. Now, first on tonight's agenda, we want to answer the question, what do we want for mom and baby? When we think about the issues, the risks, and the challenges that teen parents face, and the complexity of the issue for the local church, it's helpful to consider What do we want for teen parents and their children? What is our desire for them? Not only now, but also into the future. And at the end of last week, we encourage you to pause and think about what do you want for children. We're going to carry on that conversation and invited Victoria Sikakani to address us. She served as the secretary of Kwabeki Langa Community Program, whose aim is to promote the well-being of youth, young children, disabled persons, and families. She's an advocate for all children from the cradle of life and spent 26 years plus in the non-government and faith-based sector in childcare, child protection, and safeguarding, not only in South Africa, but also in 5 Southern African countries. Over the last 12 years, she's been raising awareness on the application of childcare policies and programs in various contexts. So we've asked Victoria Sikakani to share her thoughts and experiences on what do we want for all our children and their children.
My name is Victoria, I think as I've been introduced. And today I'm just going to mention a few things about parenting for teenagers, remembering and reminding everybody that teenagers too are children. And as a church, I need to say that while we would like to build resilience for children and their families or children's families, because we also have child-headed households, our children are often invisible. And I think as much as we talk about the invisibility of children, it is worse when they are teenagers and they've fallen pregnant and they try their best to hide themselves from society because of the evidence of a newborn child coming up. So I will try and restrict what I'm going to say, just for us to feel that teenagers also need to be celebrated as children. So it's from that point of view that I would like to address some of just a few fundamental things. When children are parents, we often forget that they are still children and lots of changes are happening to them and they're not aware of that is happening within their bodies. What we need to know and bear in mind all the time is that our fundamental role and responsibility is to ensure that we care for children so that they grow up and they thrive and they reach their full potential. We need to remind ourselves that children are people too. And because they are people, they feel, I think, the tensions that surround them more, and that in itself is punishment. But they're growing up in a society that has, for some stupid reason, I'd say stupid because we do it all the time, I'm guilty of it too, we believe that we need to shame these children. We believe that we need to make them feel guilty. And very often we find people to blame and very seldom look at ourselves and perhaps what we have contributed to their situation. And it is against that backdrop that I would like to say we need to turn society around and be conscientious about not making any person, particularly children, feel guilty. Any person, particularly children, feel ashamed. Any person, and particularly children, blame them for the situations that they find themselves in, because there are many, many circumstances that have forced or caused children to get into a situation where they are fallen pregnant. We want to inspire this change, and together as a church, I believe we have the capacity to do it, provided that we have the right intentions. And the right intentions are those that God has already presented to us. Because when He created a human being, amazingly enough, when He looked at children, I think you'll find it in the book of, if I'm not mistaken, it is Luke 18 or in Matthew, where you would find him talking to a child and bringing a child close to him and reminding us of how precious a child is in his sight, and reminding us that it's those with a mind such as these that will enter the kingdom of God. And so we have to be mindful that when we are raising children, interacting with children from any age, I think the church is working with children from the cradle right to death, if I say so, although legally we always say we're working with children between the ages of birth and 18. This program that is presented by Sikunye hones us in on the importance of the very, very early ages of raising children, both secularly and biblically. And this is from conception right up until, I think, 3.5 years old, if I count the first 1,000 days. And it is then our role collectively to make sure that those children reach their full potential for life. And where do we find this call for us to be mindful of the way we're raising children? I think over many experiences or exposures to early childhood development and different lectures, I've learned and I've found that there's emphasis on the fundamental guidelines that God has made children so that we can nurture and raise them up in the way that He desires, as presented in Proverbs 22, where it says, raise up a child in the way that they should go, and they will never fall away from it. So remembering that call for us to make sure we raise up these children, we need to be reminded of that call in the book of Proverbs. Yes, we're also reminded of the fact that children are at risk, children are vulnerable. And if a child is a parent, they are more vulnerable, and they are going to bring up this holistic human being created in the image of God in this world, which is already upside down, which is already topsy-turvy, as we call it. And we are called, particularly as Africans, and Africans, I'm using it inclusively of all racial groups under the sky of Africa. We are called to shape our children today and shape them for a different tomorrow. And together we can begin to do that. We can change the notion that children of teenagers themselves will become teenage parents. And it is this a challenge that has been presented to the church, that from this time onwards, from the time when we go out saving one child or one family at a time, children, raising children, we can be sure that tomorrow children will be the kind of children who are resilient, the kind of children who would be strong, the kind of children who will hold on to the word of God and understand how precious they are in God's sight. And because we will be representing God, they will be precious even in our sight. So having said those things, I'd like to come and say that there are basic things that children / human beings need in life. All our children need to be loved. I think you too would acknowledge that you always need to be affirmed with love. All our children desire to be disciplined, corrected, and guided. If you're a human being, you need that sense of feeling that you're in a space of discipline. And all our children need a sense of security. Now, the church being the safe sanctuary that it is for all people, irrespective of what they've done in life, we need to ensure that our churches are a welcoming space for all children, irrespective of what they have done. Likewise, the church has been a safe sanctuary for all people who have done something in their lives, because we're all not perfect and we want to feel welcome. And there are 5 things that I think everybody can begin to ponder when you're dealing with this matter. As people, we all want to have a sense of belonging. Now, our attitudes sometimes may make people feel rejected or unwanted, and we need to look at them the way Jesus would look at them, and you would need to look at them as if this is an image of God that is coming in. It's a hard thing to do if you've never thought about it, but it gives one a sense of being part of and a sense of feeling welcome and a sense of belonging. The second important fundamental element that we need to include, and these are all biblical calls, if I must say so myself, is where they feel a sense of creativity. It wasn't a mistake when God in Genesis reminds us that we will be co-creators when he talks about man. He gives them that objective. We are co-creators. So children bring with them into our space their own creativity. And it is for us to identify and nurture that creativity. So in the sense of making that person feel they belong, their creativity moves us to the third very, very important fundamental element. And that is a sense of significance. People need to feel significant, especially children. They seek attention just because they need to have a sense of significance. They learn about us much faster than we even know they're learning about us, so that they can do things for us and with us to have that sense of significance. So in that environment that you are creating, that will be very, very pivotal for the children. The fourth one is that we are all members of God in his church, just by the virtue of baptism, if I have to say so. And therefore the church becomes that community. So you're not only a family member in your nuclear family or extended family, but being church, being part of church, being a member of church, you then come into this circle of what we call community. And our churches need to begin to see that happening for the children. And the very, very important one is the sense of security. Nobody wants to come into a space where they don't feel secure. And our children demand that sense of security. And the onus is on us to make sure that that happens. And last but not least, just to round this topic, it is our responsibility to walk alongside our young people, not to do things for them, or not to remind them about the bad things that they've done, because they're already in a bad situation. And that in itself is taking its toll emotionally on them. So we need to be there and give them a hearing. Don't do for them. They must also learn to ask. They must also learn to seek information. And they must also know that this responsibility will not end, but it is a lifetime responsibility. And with that, I'm sure other people will add more. Feel free to ask questions and we'll provide you with information as we go along. Thank you very much for listening.
I've so appreciated Mama Victoria's thoughtful approach to seeing teenagers with deep love, that it moves from a kind of a heart thing to a very practical thing that teenagers need and desire. And the powerful message that I just want to, in so many ways, underline is that all of our children, they need love, guidance, and belonging. And we need to ensure that our churches are sanctuaries for people, a safe place where to help our teenagers feel secure. And this holds up a mirror to our own hearts, doesn't it? It holds up a mirror to our attitudes, our practices. Are we demonstrating this? Are we giving children a sense of love and guidance and security? Are we sanctuaries for teenagers in our community and in our church? It raises an interesting question for ourselves, doesn't it? Now, I just want to acknowledge those of you who have introduced yourselves in the chat box. It's wonderful to see people, and in particular from different organizations. Greetings to all of you. Many of the organizations that introduce themselves, we partner with them and in many ways look to them as thought leaders in this space. I want to thank you for being here tonight and participating in this journey with us. As we did last week, we recognize it's important to listen to the experiences of teenagers who are parents. We don't want to be talking about teenagers and not talking with them. So, to help bring their voices into the room, we interviewed a range or a few different teenagers via WhatsApp and going to play a recording of that now. We want to protect the identity of these children, and so we're not going to share their names or what they look like. We hope to learn from it and recognize that people can listen to teenagers, learn from them, and have a clean ear to listen. Let's experience the ups and downs of a teen mom.
My ups and downs of being a teen mom, meaning good and bad experience. So my kid is only coming this month, but I've experienced some good and bad things. So the good things that I experienced was the kicking in my belly, getting ready for the baby, planning names, and just the feeling that I'm going to become a mom. The bad things are vomiting, the pain, people talking about me, back pains, thinking about labor, and not knowing if I'm going to be a great mom. What type of support is needed? As I'm a teen mom, I was at school, I had no money, no job. So you are going to need somebody that supports you financially. The second support that I needed was emotional support because what people say and talk about you goes to your head, and when you are pregnant, you become very emotional. The last support that I needed was self esteem support. I thought very low of myself. I thought I wasn't worth anything. I thought I didn't have the ability to carry this child or walk in the road or to let anybody see the belly bump. And that was my experience.
We encourage all of us to be listening to the stories of teen parents. Everyone is unique. Encourage you to listen into their hopes and their dreams and the kind of support they want, the challenges they're facing, plus the strengths that they have to face down those challenges. And again, asking that teenager to share only as much as they're comfortable. We're not forcing teenagers to share their story. We want to have big ears to listen to their experiences. And one of the key themes that has come up in this webinar series so far is that teen parents need a community of support around them. It isn't just one person supporting a teenager. In fact, it takes many. It takes that modern day village. You could almost picture it being like layers of support around a teenager. For the baby to get a strong start to life, we need to focus on the well being of the teen parents. And this is not just wishing them well, it's practical, it's organizing them, it's intentionally surrounding and supporting them. And we've asked our next guest speaker to help unpack that for us. Dr. Estelle Lawrence has worked in the Department of Health as a medical officer in the School, Youth and Adolescent Health Services in the Khayelitsha Eastern Substructure in Cape Town since 2002. Prior to this, she practiced family medicine in the community health centers in Cape Town and Soweto. and her postgraduate qualifications include a diploma in family medicine and a PhD in public health. Her present position includes providing technical support to health facilities to strengthen their delivery of comprehensive adolescent and youth-friendly health services, as well as assistance in the implementation of adolescent pregnancy programs. Dr. Lawrence will help us understand the layers of support that the teen parents need in order to flourish and provide what their young child needs in order to thrive.
I'm going to share my slides. So once again, thank you for inviting me to do a presentation tonight. As Richard said, I'll be talking about how we can support teenagers. And I'd like to start with this slide, which is actually a screenshot that I took at last week's webinar. So if you attended last week's webinar, you will remember that there were some voice recordings from young moms that were shared. And this one really hit home to me. The young mom said, sometimes things look hard, but when people support you, things get a little easier. I hope that that says something to you too. So let's look at what sort of support young moms need. We've already heard from the previous recording. She has mentioned some of them. So firstly, as a teenage mom, they need health support. They also need social support, educational support, economic and financial support, as well as emotional and mental support, and spiritual support. And perhaps you can think of some others too, but these are ones that I'm going to focus on this evening. Let's start with the health support. So a young mom needs to be healthy. If she's healthy, baby's healthy. And so we need to make sure that she gets good, healthy nutrition for herself, and that she remains physically active and lives a healthy lifestyle, which might also mean helping her deal with substance abuse. Unfortunately, many of our teenage moms do use substances, including alcohol. Then it's also important that she attends her local clinic regularly, both before baby is born, the antenatal clinics, and then also after baby is born, the postnatal clinic visits. And of course, it's not just about her health, but of course also the health of the baby. So we need to make sure that she gets supported to keep her baby healthy. Then the emotional and mental support. So what the Department of Health provides is home visits from community health workers. And if a teenage mom is booked at an antenatal clinic, she will then be referred to a community health worker to get home visits and support at home. There are also various nonprofit organizations and community-based organizations and faith-based organizations that provide support to young moms, either through counseling or support groups and various other ways. And then all health facilities have access to a mental health nurse or a counselor. They might not have one at that health facility, but if a teenage mom visits her health facility, she can be referred to a facility where she can get the support. And then, even if a young mom doesn't have all of the support that I've mentioned before, sometimes all that's needed is a trusted adult. Let's look at educational support. So many of the teenage moms are still in school, and it's important that she stays in school, or if she's left school, that she returns to school. Because we know if she stays in school, firstly, if she finishes her school, her matric, she has better employment opportunities. But also we know that if a young mom stays in school, she's less likely to fall pregnant again and less likely to get HIV. So it's so very important that she is encouraged to either stay in school or return to school if she has left. And how can we do that? Well, every school is linked to a social worker. And the Department of Education actually has a policy, which is called the Policy for the Prevention and Management of Learner Pregnancies. And the policy states that if a school knows that a learner is pregnant, they are meant to refer that learner to the school social worker. The school social worker will then meet with the learner and their family and make sure that she is supported educationally. So they will make sure that they put together a plan as to how long she can be at school, how she will be supported when she's not in school, if she has to go for clinic visits. The school social worker will assist with that. Then the policy also says that we need to think of a teenage mom as a learner with special needs. And so they should be provided with learning support if they need it. The school is also meant to make accommodations for the mom. So if she, for instance, has to deliver or goes into labor at a time when a test is to be written, the school needs to arrange that she can either write that test or make up in some other way. And then it's also important that they get support outside of school. And so many schools and community organizations have homework and study clubs where teenage moms can go and get support. And these can be very helpful. Let's look at the social support. So I spoke about the social worker from the Department of Education, but there are also social workers from the Department of Social Development and also other organizations. And it's important that every teenage mom gets referred to this social worker too, because the social worker at the Department of Education will only focus on her educational needs, but she'll need lots of other support, like was mentioned before. One of the things is access to social grants. Many of the young moms are not working and struggle financially. And so it's important that they know how to get financial assistance. And then if you listened to the webinar last week, we heard that many young moms are actually coerced into having sex. So the GBV there is for gender-based violence. I'm sure if you live in South Africa, we all know that. And unfortunately, that can be the cause of her being pregnant. And she might still be in a situation where she's experiencing gender-based violence, and she will need support with that. And then we talk about parenting skills for young moms, but I wish we had been taught parenting skills in school when I was at school. I think we all need it, but especially our young moms. And there are many organizations that do provide parenting skills, and it's so important that young moms get linked to these organizations. So I've been saying young moms all the time, but there are young fathers, sometimes not young, but there are young fathers. And then these young moms also have parents that are probably young too. So I just want to bring in the father so that we remember there is a father, and sometimes the father is close and is supportive, sometimes not as close, but still trying to be supportive. Sometimes, unfortunately, and actually very often, the father doesn't play a big role. And I'm just putting in the parents there so that we remember when it's not just about the mom, but that all these people in the baby's life need support. So what role can the church play? And these are some suggestions. I'd also love to hear what other churches are doing, and I hope at some stage in the series that people can share that. So one of the slogans from the Department of Health is everyone's business. And so that means everyone, including faith-based organizations, the private sector, the Department of Education, the Department of Sport and Recreation, it's everyone's business. And so what some churches have been doing is they have been providing their space, either the actual church or the church hall, as a venue for outreaches, so that the Department of Health can then send staff to these venues so that they are closer to where the community is. And this is something that churches can do, making the health service more accessible for the young mom. The other thing that I mentioned earlier was nutrition, how important that is for a young mom. And so many churches help with things like food parcels, but also other sorts of donations, monetary, but also with toiletries or with toys, clothes. These are ways that the church could support. Another role that the church can play is to be the safety net. So you've listened to this webinar and to my presentation, and I hope I've pointed out what's available, which services have been are on offer by the various departments. And so I encourage you to be the link. If there is a young mom or young family in your congregation, to encourage them to access these services and to help them to link to those services. The church can also be their support. I said earlier, a trusted adult is so important, and there are many trusted adults in your congregation. That could be the person that supports this young mom and the young family. I know of churches where they actually offer free counseling. Some of the congregation, they might be qualified counselors or psychologists, and they volunteer their services to do this. Also support groups. We find that this is so helpful for young moms if they can meet with other young moms and share their experiences. And the church could provide the actual support group if they have staff or people who have the skills, or otherwise just provide the venue for the support group. And likewise, the venue could be used for after-school clubs, homework clubs. And then this is so important, a place of connection and belonging. I'll never forget a young boy that I was visiting at a school with very severe behavioral challenges. And we were trying to give him all sorts of support, and he had quite a traumatic childhood, and nothing was helping. And one day when I visited the school, they reported that everything was fine. He was doing so well. And the thing that had changed was that a neighbor had invited him to the church youth group. And as soon as he started attending the youth group, things changed. He'd found a place where he felt he belonged, where he felt he was getting some sort of connection from the other youth group members, from the leaders, and it changed things for him. And so the church can be this for a young mom. And then another thing a church can do is actually model caring and empathy. What better place to show what unconditional love is all about? So many of our young moms are discriminated against. They experience a lot of stigma, and the church could change that. If we can show that we love the mom and we don't judge her, that we all make mistakes and we're still accepted and supported. This is such a huge role that the church can play. And then, as I mentioned before, gender-based violence is a huge problem, and often it's related to gender norms. The man is the boss in the house. The man's allowed to force the woman to do things. The man's allowed to beat the woman. And if we can change this way of thinking through what we do and say within the church, we can play a huge role against fighting gender-based violence. And then I think this is the biggest role that each and every person can play, is breaking the cycle of teenage pregnancy. And what do I mean by that? So when a young mom falls pregnant, she's more likely to leave school early, she's more likely to have poor job opportunities and end up living in poverty. And because of this, her child is more likely to not grow and develop well, and may end up having learning difficulties. And because of that, will also, is very likely to leave school early and also end up being a teenage mom or dad. And we can break this cycle by supporting the young mom. So that's my final slide. I encourage all of you and say, let's do this. We can support a teenage mom. By doing that, we are giving her baby the best start to a brighter future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence. And I really love this image of surrounding the teenager in a safety net, that a teenager is not isolated, not alone, rather facing down this very important life stage with others. And to underline what Dr. Lawrence stated at the end there, by supporting a teen mother, we are giving her baby best start to a brighter future. Now, I love the connections that are being made in the chat box. And if you have a program that is aimed at teen parents, please do share relevant information in the chat box. And what I mean by relevant information is like contact information, if your services are located in a particular area, because there may be church leaders who are looking to find the services and programs where they can be partnering with or refer teen parents to, or maybe an organization that wants to come and use your church venue to reach teenagers, and so on and so on. We would love that connection to take place. I can't advertise the services of different organizations and looks like I'm playing favorites. And I also recognize that there are people here who, when they introduce themselves, they may know of something or didn't introduce the whole range of offering that they have. So I do see some organizations that introduce their names. I know they do have teen parenting programs. A wonderful opportunity to put that contact information into the chat box so that others can connect with you. Now, one of the things that we learned last week, was that 1 in 3 teen mothers do not return to school. And Dr. Lawrence reiterated that. And this has a long-term impact on the teen mother and her ability to get an education, of course, which impacts on her employment prospects. And this naturally, as you can understand, negatively impacts the opportunities that mom has to provide for herself and her young child. We all know the importance of finishing school in terms of employment opportunities. So how can we support teen parents that are in school? Now, if this is something that you want to explore further, we encourage you to read the email that we send to you later this week. In there is a link to a recording of Noluthando Yawa, actually part of our Common Good team, outlining some of the things that you can be doing and things that schools can be doing to be supporting teen parents. We've also included a link to a toolkit for those of you who are in the education sector, maybe not in the church sector, but in the education sector. Just another note on the Zoom functionality. If you want to react, you're welcome to tap your screen. You'll see a menu at the bottom, and seeing react, and you'll be able to whether give a thumbs up or a heart or a celebration or all of those emojis that we love to put in our WhatsApps. You're able to do that in the reactions button. Now, in our conversations with church leaders on this very big topic, it gets complex very quickly, and they share some of the challenges that they're facing. Some church leaders share with me that they're concerned that if they support teenagers who are pregnant, it's sending a message that being unmarried and falling pregnant is okay. It's kind of like they're agreeing with their sexual activity. It might even, they use the language of it's condoning their behavior that got them in this situation. Others have shared that congregants, many times the older congregants, put pressure on them as church leaders, saying the church must make it as hard as possible on the teenager because it sends a strong message to other teenagers to not be sexually active. They might use language of, you must punish that girl, because then other teenagers will learn. And so this raises an important question. Can you care for teenagers who are parents and not promote sin or promiscuity, or is it the same thing? And so to help us engage this question some more, we invited Dr. Jeremy Weingard to share with us. Dr. Weingard has a PhD from the University of Stellenbosch's theology faculty, focusing on theology and development. In addition to his academic successes, he actively serves young people as the director of the nonprofit Life Zone Ministries, which he founded in 2004. He also serves as an adjunct lecturer at the Cape Town Baptist Seminary and a research associate at Stellenbosch University Theology Faculty. And recently he started as the director of the Moravian Theological Center. He's married with 2 children and is passionate about helping youth to maximize their potential in all areas of their lives. Dr. Weingard will unpack for us how we can care for teen parents without promoting sin. Let's lean in.
It's a real honor and a privilege here, and thank you so much for the invitation. Yeah, I'd like to just share with you from my heart. I've got the presentation all set here, so I'll be sharing that just in a second. And yeah, I've already been inspired by both Victoria and Estelle, just sharing from their perspectives. So I'm going to get straight into it, and thank you for this wonderful introduction. I already feel at home. So thanks, Richard and Ruth and Sikunye for the invitation. So I'm going to share the screen now and just pull up. Let me just see. Right. So I'm sure you'll be able to see my screen now. Okay, so I'm not sure if there's anything covering, but perhaps Estelle could just, sorry, not Estelle, Ruth could just help us if my side panel video is covering anything. So anyway, I'm going to get straight into this idea, this notion of caring for teen parents without promoting sin. So, but I'm taking a very particular view, okay, and looking at an ecclesiological missional perspective, meaning the church's role in mission. Okay, so I want to just ensure that I can complete this in the next 15 minutes. So let me begin by just referring to what I just heard from 2 of our speakers just now. I just made a small slide on the side. Victoria mentioned something very important earlier on, that children are people too. And if I think of children, I think immediately of Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5, where God told Jeremiah that before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. And the baby in the womb of the teen mom and the teen dad themselves are people who God also knows about. All right. It sometimes seems that it's the church and society who do not want to know these valuable, precious children. And Victoria also mentioned 5 things that teen parents need. And these 5 things she talked about was the sense of belonging, creativity, significance, and also being part of God's community and having a sense of security. And then, of course, Estelle mentioned earlier about the roles that the church can play, providing our venues as safe spaces for outreach. That should be par of the course. It shouldn't be if or maybe. It should just be that the church should do that. So I'm taking a very biased approach to that. Caring and empathy is core to that. The church can partner health services and all the other social development institutions. The church as teen parent support, and this is where the spiritual dimension comes in, of supporting our young teens. Estelle used the example of the young boy that attended the youth group, and that experience was life-changing, and that's what the church is about and should do. One of the players who played in my side, he wasn't a married young man, but him and his girlfriend had a baby, and they were not particular church goers. And I spoke to my pastor and I said, can we please dedicate their child? And that served as an opportunity for ministry for us to minister to young people who would otherwise not come to a church. So we should think about that sacrament of baptism or dedication as an important missional opportunity for us to serve our community and be more visible and relevant. So the next slide then leads me into my topic. And this picture that we have here is a picture that is on the Focus on the Family website. And I think it describes exactly, you can see the imagery here, the attitude of, let's say, the minister and the pregnant mom, and you can see there's something happening here. So the pregnancy and the church must be part of our debate. If 1 in 3 kids, as we heard earlier on, or 1 in 3 young ladies are falling pregnant, teens are falling pregnant, then that is quite a big statistic. And that means that we will always be dealing with this challenge of engaging and ministering to our young moms and dads. So, as I said by introduction, I'm taking this particular approach, an ecclesiological missional approach to caring for teen parents. And I just added this spiritual care in brackets here based on what I just heard from our previous 2 speakers. So I'm going to lead into this conversation again by using again this notion here, this little story here of what I found on the website again of Focus on the Family. It says that the availability of church-based support groups for women with unplanned pregnancy and strong partnerships with local pregnancy centers can provide the hope that a young woman needs to choose life for her child. Okay, so we see that the church can provide hope. I'll just drop down to this section here that says it's an opportunity to share the gospel and introduce her or the young man to a savior who cares so much for them. So unfortunately, and this is not me, this is the person telling the story here on this Focus on the Family group, says that this pastor still sees cases where a girl chooses life over abortion, but only to have a church turn their backs on the young woman, even asking her to leave the congregation or the youth group during her pregnancy. The fear of pastors and, of being afraid that other teens could also then fall pregnant. The same message comes from Focus on the Family website, Unplanned Pregnancy and the Church, and it says that after experiencing, and this is not me, this is the person giving the story, just like the young girl clip that Richard played earlier, and this is in quotation marks, after experiencing my own unplanned pregnancy 20 years ago, I was seconds away from having an abortion myself. I firmly believe that the frequency of abortions would go down dramatically if the church was a better source of help for women in this lady's situation. So the question then is, what if we made the church the first place a young woman ran to when she found out she was pregnant? So instead of away from the church because of shame and guilt, what if the church stopped being so loud about what we are against, but became famous for our love and what we are for? We can be pro-love and not just pro-birth. And then here's an important quote from this Focus on the Family website, following from their comments here. A church without the broken is a broken church. I will just leave that hanging there. So I'm going to then I won't read all of the text here, but essentially what we see here are 2 lenses, well, 2 pictures that speak, that helps us to see, when we look through lenses, we have particular biases, obviously. And so when we look at pregnant teens, what are our biases as pastors, as ministers, as leaders in the church? How do we view these teens? Do we view them as just black and white, or should I say sinfulness? Or do we see them as people with potential that God has created in God's own image? And can we see the beauty and the color in all of what this unborn child is about? And just while I'm on this, it's an interesting story. My mom passed away 2 years ago, but at all the functions, 50th, 60th, 70th birthday parties, as the eldest, I would always be making speeches, and I would always tease her and calculate the days from when she got married she and my dad got married to when I was born. So there was like within 5 months after the marriage, I was born, and I would tease her, and she would laugh herself, to pieces. And I'm saying that if she thought that I was an unnecessary burden to her, I could have been aborted, given the tradition of the time, the cultural expectation that, people who are unmarried, shouldn't have children, or they should be hidden. But she had me, and God has used me. He's still using me for his glory and his purpose. So we need to support every teen, and we need to uncover our biases as an important exercise as ministers. Only when we do this are we able to deconstruct the lenses we use to work for transformation. We need to remove the log in our own eyes so that we have eyes to see and ears to hear. And then, of course, in John 8, verse 7, we see this text when Jesus speaks to the crowds, the self-righteous people, and he says, let those who have no sin cast the first stone. And so we need to understand that we are called by God to be missional, even with teens. And so this ecclesiological approach, therefore, asks us, what understanding of theology or God or the church do we depend on to inform our decision-making where caring for teen parents are concerned? What theology forms us? What is our understanding of God? What lenses do we look through when we talk about God, the church, and our role when it comes to teen parents? Is it a theology of suspicion, of judgment, and of bias? Or is it a theology of tangible hope, guided by a missiological or kingdom of God principle? And I just completed a chapter in a book that was published on the 18th of October in Norway. It's a group of academics from Stellenbosch, University of the Western Cape, Huguenot College, also a lot of academics in Norway, Sweden, Austria. And I wrote a chapter on tangible hope based on the work of our ministry, Life Zone, where we use football and sports as a vehicle to reach young people, girls and boys, having girls and boys schools, football leagues. And out of my research over the last 10 to 15 years, I interviewed some of the kids who are now some of our own coaches in the school program. And I tried to articulate this concept of tangible hope. Very contradictory, tangible, something concrete, and hope being something abstract. So more about that later. But let me briefly share, as a response, number one, what I think theology is about. And secondly, I will share just some small few thoughts of John de Gruchy's idea of what a faithful praxis or an orthopraxis means for the church in mission, especially in relation to the church's caring for teen parents. And this reinforces the ecclesiological missional approach. And we see the beautiful cross that has made it possible for us to engage ecclesiologically and missionally in society as a relevant organization called the church, this beautiful vehicle. So for me, theology is about these 8 things. And Professor Jürgen Hendricks, one of my mentors, he is now an emeritus professor from Stellenbosch University. When I was doing my master's at Stellenbosch, he presented a number of courses. And he wrote a book together with a lot of African ministers. As Victoria said earlier, African by all expressions within our continent. And these were ministers from as far afield as Malawi, Zambia, Tanzania, Namibia, all over Southern Africa, and some from them from out overseas. And they came up with this notion, what theology is all about. And I want to focus particularly on the missional praxis, number one, the Christ body, the church, and the Missio Dei, just briefly. We cannot speak about all the others, but they are all needed in order for us to work through this. And I just want to, before I start discussing, When I prepared my first PowerPoint or my first few notes for this webinar, there were 3 key concepts that were in my mind. And these were, firstly, it starts off with the mission of God. The second one was the image of God. And I made a note earlier when Victoria was speaking as well, that we are all created in God's image. And likewise, the teen parent and the baby in the teen mom's womb is also created in God's image. So the mission of God, the image of God, which the church should be involved in, and how we should see ourselves is as participants of the kingdom of God. So the mission of God, the image of God, and the kingdom of God. But that is for another discussion. I want to focus on the missional praxis, which speaks about the triune God, who is our creator, redeemer, and sanctifier. We also talk about Christ's body, the church. We are the church in mission and apostolic faith community. This is God's mission. It's not our mission. And so we participate in God's mission. So we need to be obedient as to who we are doing missional work with and to. And teen parents are part of God's mission field. God has given us an amazing opportunity. And as Estelle has mentioned earlier, we need to fling open wide our doors, the church doors that have become white elephants in many communities. Let it become islands of hope. Let it become the places that God intended those buildings to be, to serve others and to be a sign of the kingdom of God. So I'm going to leave the slide because we can have a whole module done on the slide, but you have the idea of what it is. So John de Gruchy, who was very, very involved in the church's fight against apartheid in our era, has an amazing series of work over the many years, and this was one of his 1994 contributions. He says that the very nature of the church has to do with his participation in the Missio Dei. Excuse the end there, my typo. Mission begins with God and is God's mission in and to the world. Who is supposed to be participating there? The church does not initiate, but the church participates in it, in God's mission. The church, it's non-negotiable that we need to deal with teen parents. It's non-negotiable that we need to deal with the violence, the corruption. It's non-negotiable. The church has to be the missional voice in the world. Mission is the total task which God has set the church for the salvation of the world, because mission arises from God's love and concerns for the entire world in all its dimensions. And where do teen parents fit into this? So by locating the church within the divine sending activity of the triune God, mission is not just something which the church does as one activity amongst others, but mission is the very ground for its existence. If we are not ministering to teen parents, then we are not engaged properly in this mission of God. We don't need to fly from here to the USA or to Europe or elsewhere across the world to go and do mission. We have the mission fields in Cape Town in abundance, in South Africa in abundance. The mission field is ripe, and we need to participate in this mission, especially with our teen parents. Thus, the church exists by virtue of its participation in the mission. We exist simply because we are missional, and God has created us as a church that way. So, and where the church fails to participate in God's mission, it ceases to be the church. So participating in mission to teen parents then means that participation in the mission they gives to the church its particular character in the world, right? And that is how people understand us. And in the beginning, God transformed chaos into creation and confusion into community. The church itself is a sign of this new community which God is seeking to create. We can create a community of teen moms who can tell their story. And I heard that earlier today at my son's valedictory, what is your story? And you know, I believe strongly in a theology by the people. Every child has a voice. This young girl's clip that we heard earlier, this young girl is going to change many lives. She's going to be an influencer, also encouraging other teen moms. The young boy that went to that youth service, as Estelle mentioned, is going to change the world. That person has a story. That boy has his own theology. He has his own story. And we need to encourage that theology by the people. As academics, we can pull together stuff nicely and package it, but we need to hear the stories of our young girls, our young boys, the teen moms. And I'm glad that Richard, when he started, said that we need to bring the voice of the people we are talking about into this conversation. And that was something very beautiful. So thanks for that, Richard. Thus it was the Christians of the early church were accused of turning the world upside down because of the way that they transformed the society around them. So we have to think outside of the box and flip the way churches think about teens. Let's embrace teen moms and dads who are expecting their child. Let's embrace them, because through that we will be able to save their child and the next generation, and be part of this transformation that Bryant Myers speaks about, this whole thing of transformation. The mission of God as proclaimed by Jesus is holistic, and our holistic role is with teen moms and dads as well. The struggle for justice and liberation, the need for forgiveness and reconciliation, we heard that earlier, the healing of mind and body, the search for meaning and the awakening and sustaining of faith, hope and love. These are all kingdom values, kingdom of God values. And we see that Jesus even taught us how to pray. Jesus taught us, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Where? Not one day in heaven, but on earth as it is in heaven. These values of faith, hope, love, opening up the church doors, ministering to teen moms and teen dads is so important. We need those kingdom values in order to boost the self-esteem, the image of God that is already there, the way they've been created, to help young people to understand that they still have value and to still have a contribution to make. So then, in closing, the story of Jonah demonstrates God's attitude of love and grace to all people. And we know that Jonah absolutely argued and fought with God, because why would God in chapter 4 want to save these Assyrian people who were so cruel and brutal, who kill people, you know, for fun and dried their skins on poles, you know, as a hobby? Why would God want to save people such as those people in Nineveh? So for the church, why would God want to save teen moms and teen dads? Shouldn't we, with our kingdom values of love, grace, and truth, and compassion, reach out to our teen moms and teen dads? And do you know that if we reach out to our teen moms, teen dads, and we are reaching out to their unborn child too, we are reaching out to the teen moms, parents, grandparents, and maybe there are people who are also not at church. It's a massive opportunity for us in the mission. So this mission is for the church. It is an ecclesiological, missional perspective that we can use. We can put on that lens and put on those glasses and say, perhaps we need to look at teen moms and support and care for our teens in this way. The church is called to serve teen parents because it is part of our non-negotiable mission. And there are some websites here that you can look at with the story of Jonah, and then also a longer YouTube video, a whole series of videos that talk about grace and truth and love, not just for teen moms, but in life in general. So hopefully this ecclesiological, missional, sorry, another typo, I didn't fix that yet, apologies, approach to and with our teen parents will contribute towards a more graceful, relevant, helpful way of addressing the societal challenge. And then with that, I'd like to just say thank you and appreciate this time that we could share together with you. So God bless you.
There is so much to reflect on coming out of that presentation. And there's a reminder, there's on our in our email to you on Friday, we'll have those slides. I know there's such great points that you might not have been able to see on a small device, but we will be emailing a link to that you can access those presentation and look at it in more detail. But one thing I appreciated among the many things that Dr. Weingart shared was framing this complex question in light of the mission of the church. And this helps us see that to punish girls in order to send a message to other teenagers is not in line with the purpose or the heart of the church that Jesus started. And so when we look at the heart and the ministry and the teaching of Jesus, we recognize that he cared for the tax collectors and the people of the time that were shunned and pushed aside. And the people on the outside were looking, misunderstanding Jesus. They were calling him a friend of sinners. But he was going about his father's mission and going about his father's purposes. The next thing we're going to be looking at is getting really practical and looking at the story of a church that is caring for teen parents. Now, Capricorn Community Church is a small church in the community of Capricorn in the southern parts of Cape Town. And Capricorn, you could describe as a low income area with high levels of poverty, informal dwellings, crime and violence are commonplace. And it's also a community with high levels of teenage pregnancy. And this church is actively reaching out to teen parents. So we've just heard a theological framing. Now we're going to look at some of the practical things of why this church is caring for teen mothers. So we're going to listen to Reverend Bernadette White Phillips sharing some of the story of Capricorn Community Church.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bernadette White Phillips, and I'm pastor at Capricorn Community Church, which is based in Vrygrond. It's really my happy spot. I have found my niche in this community, and I've been serving there from the first week of lockdown. So I would say this has been my first solid year of church, but the last couple of years have been getting to know the community and understanding the different people that live there and the wonderful diversity that's there. And I really am blessed to be there. I am a missionary for Pinelands Baptist Church, sent to serve as senior pastor at Capricorn Community Church. I have a real passion for young people, particularly those who are facing trials and challenges. And in the first year of my time at Capricorn Community Church, I noticed that there were a lot of teenage pregnancies, not only in our church, but also in the community. I think COVID had something to do with it, but just finding out from people, this is kind of the norm. Young girls are falling pregnant, even from as young as primary school, and the ones in our church were mainly teenagers. And it really concerned me about sort of the support that these girls were getting. Because I was hearing feedback from the parents who were understandably really upset, and they were trying to decide what to do with these young girls. Now it means their future is kind of ruined, and what do we do with the problem? And it's a sin to sleep with someone before you're married, and it came with a whole lot of spiritual issues, a whole lot of emotional issues and practical issues. And so I had to put my head around this, and I wanted to just ask the question. I had to ask myself, so in this situation, how does Jesus ask me to respond? And I've just written a few scriptures that sort of get my heart beating. And the first one is actually quite an interesting one, because it says, let the children come to me. Jesus says, do not stop them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these, from Matthew 19. Because I got to really understand that these teenagers are still children themselves. Although they are physically mature and enough to engage in sexual practices, but emotionally, they're still very young. And perhaps they are terrified and scared. And, you know, as a pastor of a church, what do we do? Do we say, oh, no, sorry, you're unclean and you can't come near us? And you're going to be disciplined, or are you going to embrace, or are you going to invite, and are you going to help restore? Are you going to partner? And I think that's where my heart lies, is that these young girls really need to be anchored at this time for the sake of for their lives, but also for the next generation, that these young women and men, because we mustn't forget the partners, because they're also very important in this decision of supporting. It's important that they also receive support. Yeah, so that was kind of my heartbeat, is just to hold on to them and bring them in closer to the heart of our heart of the church, and also the heart of the Father. And the other scripture was in terms of partnering with God, when Jesus says, "Come to me, all you are weary, for my yoke is light, and I will carry you." And so this is the encouragement, is to invite people in, the young teens in, but not just to let us carry them, but also to allow the Father to hold them as well as they experience this new concept of parenting. And the third scripture is the partnership that we have in prayer with the Lord, where he says, "Bring all your burdens," in Philippians 4:67, that we bring all our requests before the Lord, and that we pray with the teenagers, so that they become praying parents too. So it's a responsibility that the church has to walk with people who are broken, who are suffering, and who need the love of Jesus and restoration and salvation. This is a missional opportunity for the church to work with teens who are in pregnancy. So and when they give birth to babies, that's kind of when the action takes place. We can't just say, "Well done, now that you're a parent," and walk away. It's like journeying with everyone, from the dedication of babies to the growth of these children and integration of them into the church, because we're a family. I'm certainly not just a pastor of a church. I see myself as a sister and as a mother in the community as well. So I just wanted to share, well, what do we do with all those pregnancies in the community? I had absolutely no idea. It's not I come from Pinelands, and maybe one or two girls have been pregnant before marriage, but generally I never really engaged with it. But here in the church, here we have these young children giving birth. And so I decided to reach out and ask for help. And our church had a group, had done training for the first 1,000 days. I was part of that mothers group. And then I approached them and I said, "What should we do? We've got so many young people. It's COVID, it's lockdown. What can we do?" And so I was sort of pointed to common ground, and I came across somebody called Yvonne, and she's just amazing. She said, "I'd love to come and support you as you prepare a support group for these young girls." And so we've found our own way in running a weekly meeting for these girls in preparation for pregnancy, during pregnancy, and also preparation for parenthood. So she was such a blessing, because I now kind of have an idea. I mean, from chair yoga to relaxation exercises, bringing in a doula to help our girls prepare for the time they would give birth. And it really is a challenging experience, because the hospitals that they attend, the government facilities and clinics, are not very welcoming necessarily of these young girls, and they really don't have an easy time. And so we need to teach young people their rights. We need to teach them what to expect, because they are literally terrified of the whole birthing process. And then, of course, having to face parenthood at such an age. And we've got to be there every step of the way, as I've mentioned before. So Yvonne was amazing. And for many reasons, we eventually stopped the group and haven't picked it up again, but it is still part of our radar. We have our little kids now, they're toddlers, and they growing beautifully. And there's just something that I really want to encourage church leaders, is that as soon as they're able, we want the teen parents to come to church. We want them to be part of our activities. So for instance, our teenagers do Bible study on a Tuesday night. We say, "Come, bring your baby," if obviously when it's the right time, bring your child in. There are many hands. You know, when a baby cries in a teenage group, no one stresses, because they're noisy anyway. And so we have teenagers sitting in our Bible studies. If there's a youth meeting on, they're allowed to bring their baby too. So the child gets included, many hands hold and love. And in the church, we also have this kind of sharing of babies. And I think that's really important. To sort of stand firm as sort of adults in the church with the children, and also be part of taking responsibility. So it's not just them and the families that they're involved with. So our outreach is not just to the teenagers and the baby, but also to the parents and family.
Wow. I think it's so important to note how this church is holding to the mission of God that Dr. Weingart expressed. It's beautiful, isn't it? It's messy, but it's beautiful. And when a teenager shares that she's pregnant, you've heard it come up a couple of times, the rest of the family has to process this information, this big news. We've heard in the voices of teenagers and in the stories that some of the presenters have shared, how teen mothers sometimes experience that their family want nothing to do with them. Sometimes a teen mom has to leave the house when baby was born. And I'm pretty sure that you've heard or witnessed a teenager's relational breakdown with her family in this time of big shifts and big change. Now, what is the role of the church in this kind of situation? And our next speaker is going to help us understand that. Cleopas Maseko is the CEO of Tembeletu in Nkomazi in the Mpumalanga province. The mission of Tembeletu is to alleviate the suffering of people of Nkomazi by providing health, spiritual counseling, livelihoods, and social services to the vulnerable and marginalized people. Cleopas is also director for the ZA Foundation, which is a UK charity that supports organizations to implement activities that support children and youth work. His work leads him to engage with a wide range of families and communities. Cleopas is committed to addressing social and economic challenges in the Nkomazi region, and he's married with 3 children. We asked Cleopas, what can church leaders do to engage the families of the teen parents? What opportunities exist to reach into the household from where the teenagers have come? Let's listen and learn from Cleopas.
Thank you very much, Richard. I really appreciate the work done by Sikunye, but special greetings to all of you. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be part of this discussion on a very sensitive subject about teenage pregnancy. As already indicated, I'm the CEO of Tembeletu Nkomazi, that's an NGO. And being part of that, it has really given me a privilege to work with pregnant teenagers, which also affords me an opportunity to really understand some of the challenges that they encounter, but not only limited to pregnant teenagers, but to the entire family. But before I proceed, I will want to really acknowledge the presentation by today's panelists, including Dr. Jeremy, Dr. Estelle Victoria, Pastor Benedict Nolutando, and Julia. But in addition to that is also to acknowledge the contributions by the panelists who presented last week. I think it needs to be recognized that they laid a solid foundation for us really to understand the subject of teenage pregnancy, including the impact it is having, firstly to the pregnant teenagers, but also to the families and the society as a whole. I think last week, those who attended, they will recall that we were given statistics. But in following those statistics, it needs to be recognized that we're not dealing only in terms of the numbers. Those are not numbers. We are speaking about people that have been hurt, people that are going through a lot of challenges as a result of teenage pregnancy. It was clear from last week's presentations that teenage pregnancy has firstly effects on the pregnant teenager, we saw that in most cases, they feel guilty for letting down the family. They feel bad that they've betrayed their family by becoming pregnant, because it needs to be understood that the family had hopes, they had dreams, they had aspirations for the girl that is now pregnant. So that becomes really a trauma for the girl that has been pregnant. But it was also noted that in most cases, they feel judged by the family, judged by their peers, judged by this church, in the society as a whole. Right, unfortunately, the issues that make the teenagers feel judged and disappointed is not only limited to them. It is also the experiences that even the parents of the pregnant teenager are going through. They feel they've been betrayed by the teenager, because it needs to be understood that the pregnancy now is not in line with the hopes and the dreams they had for their girl. At the same time, it should be noted that the family feels judged by the society. You have to realize that the society always views a pregnant teenager as part of a dysfunctional family, in the sense that he's pregnant because he's coming from a family that has been unable to discipline the girl. So that's another element where the families, they feel judged. In addition to that, they are disappointed, they are angered, they are embarrassed by the whole pregnancy issue, and they don't know how to respond to those challenges. But this is where there's gap for church to intervene. I'm going to respond not only as a person who is a part of the NGO, but I'm also a Christian. In my engagement with pastors, there's always a concern that if you support pregnant teenagers, you are encouraging teenagers to continue being pregnant. But I've always said to the pastors, a church is similar to a hospital, in the sense that it is nursing those who are already broken. Can you imagine a hospital saying, we're not going to treat the sick? Because if we treat the sick, we'll be encouraging those who are healthy to become sick. That would be really sad. The hospital and the church, they are treating those who are broken. We need to understand the role that the church needs to play. As already indicated, we need to understand the role that the church now needs to play, given that there's already a confusion and trauma to the pregnant teenager and to the family. The starting point is to provide counseling to the pregnant teenager, but again, even to provide counseling to the family itself. Because for us to have a healthy child, both these parties need to be emotionally, mentally in good space. But there are times when the church itself does not have the resources and even the capability of dealing with the counseling. But we need to remember the church is not operating in isolation. We need to link the pregnant teenager and the family to the right institutions and individuals that can help us, help the family, help the pregnant teenager in facing the reality and accept what has happened. That's the role of the church. But again, it needs to be understood that the church itself has got a role to providing a loving, a caring environment. Why I'm saying so? The pregnant teenager feels rejected by the system, feels rejected by the society. And now, if the church does not come in for counseling, does not provide space for the pregnant teenager to speak about all these issues, there's a danger that we are pushing the very same person who is now very vulnerable to get help and comfort from wrong places. I'm appealing to the church as an institution that has been tasked to provide love and care to those who are broken. At the same time, the church now needs to understand the value of the involvement of both the pregnant teen and the teen that has impregnated the girl. Because in the first 1,000 days, we've been equipped the importance of the presence of both of them. Now the church has got an opportunity to engage, firstly, the teenage mom and the teenage boy who has impregnated the girl, but also the families, because the families in most cases, they are the ones that stop the whole process of the two teen parents. Even if they are committed in supporting one another, they are stopped by the families. So the church has got the role to play in engaging the families so that they understand the value of allowing both these teen parents to be involved in the development, in the upbringing of their child. The church can only be the right institution to deal with issues which people raise about the cultural and other religious issues. I'm hoping that they will approach it with the love that God saved us, all of us. We are reminded in 1 John chapter 4, verse 19, he loved us before we loved him. You don't qualify so that you are accepted in your family. The church needs to provide a belonging space. And for us to belong, you don't need to qualify. There are many husbands, if it was about qualification, today they'll be told by their wives and family to say, don't come to our family because you don't qualify. There are many wives today who will be told that you don't qualify, don't come to our family. Equally, there are some parents who will come and be told by children that you don't qualify. We thank God that it's not about the qualification. We belong to one another as a family, as a church. It is my invitation that in addressing this sensitive subject, let us seek the wisdom from God and provide a loving space as a church to the teenage who are pregnant, to the parents that are affected by the pregnancy, and even to the society itself, because it's confused, it doesn't know how to handle the subject. I want to thank Sikunye and the team for providing a space to deal with this sensitive issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cleopas. This is such a powerful reminder of the opportunity that exists. Church leaders can mediate between family members where opinions are strong and they might be in conflict with each other. And in the midst of many different family practices, cultural traditions, individual stories, and church practices, there can be deep conversations around what is the healthiest option to pursue. And what I mean by the healthiest option is looking for how can we resolve this in a way that is best for mom, best for baby, best for dad, and best for the family as a whole. And you've heard me say this before, and I'll keep saying it. Every teen pregnancy story is unique. But in summary of what we've heard over the last two webinars, I want to share a few broad steps that have come up in the themes of what people have been sharing. It may help you or might guide you or shape some of the steps that you can take when you hear of a teenager falling pregnant in your church or your community. First of all, we suggest that you see the teenager as a child who needs support, security, love, and a sense of belonging. Secondly, have conversations with the teenager to listen, to learn from them. Thirdly, move towards the family and the household. Explore what they are going through, what they need, what are the strengths they have, and what are the challenges they're facing. Fourthly, explore what support is available to the teen from other service providers, maybe antenatal classes or what the health facilities are available. And as we saw in the chat box tonight, there are people in the Zoom room who have specific teen pregnancy programs that you can partner with or refer to. And fifthly, explore ongoing relationships that can be encouraged to see that there is support for the teen mom now and the teen dad now and into the future. So those are 5 steps that we encourage you to reflect on that may shape some of your responses in looking at how to care for and support teen parents. Please be reminded that our next session is on Wednesday, the 4th of December at 7 p.m. And please note that you do have to register for this event. Even if you're here tonight, you do need to register for next week. The link is in the chat box and will go in the email that we send to you later this week. And next week, we have a range of speakers to help us engage on how we can work together for the good of our children and their children. Our speakers will include Dr. Maureen Hunter, Pastor Zibo Mbedse, more from Bernadette White Phillips from Capricorn Community Church. Also, Julia Stark, who is formerly from the Parent Center, exploring how to engage and support teenage fathers, Dr. Viola Fransman, and also hearing the voices of more teen parents, including teen fathers. Now, we'll be emailing you on Friday with links to the recording from tonight, resources, slides, and websites that we've referenced as well. And I also invite you to follow us on social media to continue this conversation with us online. We're putting our handles in the chat box that you can go and follow and link, etc., etc. Now, I want to thank all of the presenters for their hard work in making tonight happen. I really felt the passion and the enthusiasm, the knowledge and the credibility, and how you went out of your way to prepare and to record and to present for us. Mama Victoria Sikakane, Dr. Weingard, Reverend Bernadette White Phillips, Cleopas Maseko, and Dr. Estelle Lawrence, thank you. On behalf of Sikunye and behalf of all the attendees tonight, strength and grace to you in the important work that you are doing in serving our cities and nation. To all the attendees, thank you for being part of tonight. Really looking forward to seeing you next week. I've been really encouraged by your comments and the contributions in the chat box. And I look forward to hearing what you're taking away and implementing within your churches, within your communities, to see that all teen parents are on a pathway of flourishing. So thank you to all of you. Good night and God bless.